ध्यायेत् शारदचन्द्रसुन्दरमुखम् ताम्रारविन्देक्षणम् भक्ताभीष्टवराभयप्रदकरम् कौपीनमोत्रोज्ज्वलम् स्वात्मानन्दरसानुभूतिविवशम् सर्वानवद्याङ्गकम् श्रीमन्तं श्रीरमणीश्वरं गुरुवरम् योगासनाध्यासितं ध्यायेत् श्रीरमणीश्वरम् ध्यायेत् श्रीरमणीश्वरम् ध्यायेत् श्रीरमणीश्वरम् हृदयकुहरमध्ये केवलं ब्रह्ममात्रम् यहमहमिति साक्षादात्मरूपेण भाति हृदि विषमनसा स्वं चिन्वतमज्जतव पवनचलनरोधात् आत्मनिष्ठो भवत्वम्। Namo Ramana. In this week, Atma Vichara session on the Friday, we will meditate on Bhagavan's words. I'll be reading his Upadesham from the book Ramana Answers, Self-Enquiry 1900 to 1950, a compilation of all the answers given by Bhagavan on the subject of Atma Vichara, and the compilation has been done by our founder, President Shri A.R. Natarajanji. And we have been looking at Bhagavan's answers between 1936 to 1950. And we have reached the 43rd question. And after reading this question and answer and meditating on it by His grace, we will have a 20 minutes Atma Vichara session, following which our President, Dr. Sharda Akka, would be talking about Atma Vicharam as it has been contemplated in Ramana Gita by Ganapati Muni. In this week's question answer, the questioner says, is there any use of the man of realization for the seeker? The question is there any use of the man of realization for the seeker? Bhagavan says, yes, he helps you to get rid of your delusion that you are not realized. Bhagavan's answer is, yes, he helps you to get rid of your delusion that you are not realized. When I read this question and answer, and we usually see that Bhagavan telling the Sparshamani can convert anything into gold, but here the uniqueness of the Guru is that He will convert the other one, also the one who has not realized or believes to be not realized, into the same as the realized being. Because the Guru is saying that is how it is. So all the notion that I have not realized will only be get rid of when we reach out to this man of realization. This man of realization here, is he as a seeker when we reach him, we see him as another being with a body, with a mind, with all the limitations that we have. But we feel that something this man has done so that he is realized the truth which I have not realized. That would be our approach. We don't see that he is the very realized being, or the being which is ever transcendental of everything. We don't see him that. The transcendental being is has taken a human form or has taken some form in front of me. We don't see it that way. We only see him with the same way in which our perception is. If I am a individual being with a body with a limitation, I may only approach the Guru also in the same way, and therefore I may have many questions. Are there any use of being association with the realized being? Bhagavan is saying he is the most useful one because he will get rid of all of our notions that we are not realized. Now, the question is, how does he help? And does he help? How long does he take to help? These are other things as a seeker that when we approach this being, this realized being, that we will have. We will not look how long will be my association with him. We will only anticipate a result on the contrary and the contrast and say, if I come to him, why can't he give it to me with what he knows? See, here it is not a knowledge that is transferred, it is actually no object that is transferred. In fact, it is to get rid of all the ideas of objects that has to happen. So, the very approach we go to a realized being is that he will give some new object for me to hold and ponder upon, whereas that being is only trying to get rid of all those ideas, get rid of get rid of that notion that there will be an object, or even let alone give any object. So he wants to get rid of everything. So the our idea would be looking for something, but what he would be giving is absolutely the realization then and there. As it is said, Bhumaha Kalu na Vijanati. Like, I am actually giving you the truth, but you are not grasping it. Because the realized being is nothing but the truth itself, standing in the human form. As they say, Rama was the embodiment of Dharma. So we can say like that, the embodiment of the truth itself is the realized being, standing there, sitting there, doing whatever it is. But it is every moment, every second that we are with that, in that presence, we are experiencing even outwardly through our eyes and everything, the realized being itself. But we will be still looking for some objective experience. So Bhagavan is saying, yes, all that realized being will do will get rid of all of these wrong notions, all of this vasanas, which are constantly making that one feel that he can know, he can do, he has to achieve, he has not realized. He will get rid of all of it. Make make that one, make all the dust on the magnet fall away, then the magnet will be realized in its full thing. So that is all that the realized being does. And we also have to understand that whatever knowledge we may gain, or whatever knowledge or understanding we may get by reading a book or by meditating on anything, it is all in the form of some objects, in the form of a mental thought or a mental understanding. All of them are only temporary in nature. They come, they stay, they go away. So they can probably aid us to get back to the self momentarily, but they are not the ones, they are, that is not the true knowledge. The true knowledge is that we are the self, and in there is no object. The self alone is. Therefore, this kind of understanding, everything that we try to aspire, those things we get rid of when we are with a realized being. He surely and steadily, by only getting back, taking us back and abiding, making us abide in our natural state, makes us to realize there is nothing out there to be sought. All that is only a delusion. And we are that realized being itself. And more speaking from the realized side, only that self, that realized being, is the only one which is really untouched by anything. Everything else, all knowledge, all ignorance, all ideas, all concepts have are insentient. Only the realized being, the self, is the sentient one and untouched by anything. So, if you want to get rid of all the non self, it is only possible by abiding in that self as the self. It is not by holding on to any ideas or knowledge. Then I, as a knower of that knowledge, will continue to persist. So here, this to this depth, the Guru is saying he will remove, he will realize, he will get rid of the delusion, and and make it clear that we are already realized. Only if we were to not go away and attach ourselves to anything external objects. That is the only thing that requires to be done. We only do so in some desire, either because of the vasanas, or it's because that we have not understood that the happiness, or we have wrongly understood the happiness is outside. When that delusion goes away, when the vasanas become weak, and the clarity that the happiness, the peace that we are looking for doesn't doesn't even exist in minuscule in any object, and that clarity comes about, and when one starts to experience the rasa of the self, the ananda rasa of the self within as oneself, then we get rid of all this delusion. So the satsang with the realized being externally or as the self within both brings about the same thing, which is to get rid of all the delusion and make realize that we are already the realized being here and now. That is the whole purpose of, or the whole use of this, of the seeker seeking the realized being, says Bhagavan in here. And Bhagavan has given us Atma Vichara, and to reach him as the self within, with every object that rises in the form of a thought, he says that it is an opportunity to realize that we have we are moved away from our steady state of self into attending some object which has rise in the form of a thought, and thereupon, then and there, he asks us to inquire to whom is this thought. Then the answer comes that it is for me. And further, Bhagavan asks us to inquire, who am I? If you say it is for me, who is this I? And when we inquire what we refer to as I, or where from this I thought rises within, we see that we are the pure being consciousness, the pure self, with the inquiry leading us to our natural state with the grace of the Master. With repeated practice, we become familiar, acquainted with our real nature. We realize here and now that moving away from it is moving into the delusion, moving away, as Bhagavan says, from shade to hot sun. The immense grace of Bhagavan, with which alone we have come to this most direct path. Let us do Atma Vichara for the next 20 minutes.
Namo Ramana, prostrations to Ramana, shining as the self in all beings. By the immense grace of the self manifest as Ramana, in this satsang we are meditating in this part of the satsang on the verses from Ramana Gita and their import in the practice of self-inquiry. We are currently meditating on the chapter 6, which is Mano Nigraho Payaha, the control of the mind. In chapter 5, Bhagavan told us about the science of the heart, and he spoke of his own accord, not in reply to any question. And he is continuing to speak of his own accord in chapter 6 on mind control. And in the first few verses of the chapter 6, Bhagavan has told us that controlling the mind through the breath, it is like controlling or keeping an animal tethered, tied by a rope. And Bhagavan then says, the control of the mind by the mind itself leads to self-abidance, leads to its destruction. Janmasthane sito bhavet vrittirodena vrittinam janmasthane sito bhavet. Then he goes on to describe how the breath is to be controlled. Pranarodhascha manasa pranasya pratyavekshanam. Pranarodhascha manasa pranasya pratyavekshanam. Kumbhakam siddhyati hyevam satata pratyavekshanat. Bhagavan says that if one must practice breath control, the best way would be by watching the breath with the mind. That means watching the breath, just simply watching the breath, not trying to alter it in any way. While speaking about the watching of thoughts, Nandakumarji says that it is a form of surrender. Such watching is a form of surrender. Because what is surrender? Surrender is acceptance of what is, not seeking to change it in any way. So when one watches one's thoughts without seeking to alter them in any way, one is surrendering to that Atma Shakti which is creating the thoughts. Because Bhagavan says in Arunachala Pancharatnam, the thoughts rise, are sustained and dissolve into Arunachala, the self. Tvai Arunachala Paramatman. Arunachala Paramatman, he says in the first verse. And in the second one, he says, Tvai Arunachala Sarvam Bhutva Stitva Pralinam Etat Chitram. The entire world picture rises, is sustained and subsides in the self, which is Arunachala. So, accepting that this is the force which is giving rise to sustaining and dissolving all the experiences, one does not seek to alter these experiences in any manner. Such is the surrender in watching the thoughts. Similarly, watching the breath is recommended here. Bhagavan has told us as I said in the earlier verse, that breath control is recommended when one is unable to control the mind through the mind. Directly controlling the mind through the mind is said to be the best method, dealing with the mind, through inquiry, or through watching of the thoughts. But if this is not possible, if the mind is still too turbulent for us to handle it, then Bhagavan has recommended breath control as a bridge or as a preamble, as a complement and supplement to self-inquiry. Now, so Bhagavan is telling over here that watching the breath would be the best way of breath control, and such watching, when it is continuous, it will lead to the breath becoming natural and steady, and that is called kumbhakam. The breath will become natural, it will become steady. This also implies that currently our breathing is neither natural nor steady, because it varies with the rise and fall of physical and mental experiences. In Upadeshasaram, Bhagavan has told us that breath and thought are two branches from the same root, and controlling one leads to control of the other. Similarly, if we want to create certain emotions in us, then the changing of breathing can also create those emotions. In the practice of drama, for instance, when we teach drama to children, if they are unable to experience a certain amount of excitement, say they have a vision of Bhagavan, or it is a scene where Bhagavan has arrived at Arunachala, and we want the children dramatically to convey some excitement, but they are not able to do that. Then we tell them to start breathing hard or hold the breath. When you have wonder at something, you just hold your breath. Or even when you have fear, you hold your breath. But there is a different physiological way of holding the breath. In wonder, the open mouthed holding of breath is there, and there is an expanse of the body. Then one feels the sense of wonderment. But in fear, one holds the breath, and there is a contraction of the body, and there will be trembling. And if the breath goes fast, then there can be excitement, or there is a sense of excitement which is created, or there can be a sense of anger which is created. So it is very clear when we do such an exercise, that the breath and the mind are connected. And here Bhagavan says that the breathing should become absolutely natural. Now what happens for us? Since the breath and the mind are connected, whenever there are any changes in the mental frame, in our mental state, then the breathing would also change. Only thing is we may not be aware of it. So when we become aware, when we constantly remain aware of the breathing, Bhagavan says it settles down and it becomes sahaja. It reaches a point of equilibrium. Sahaja means that which is natural, which is a point of equilibrium. There is no agitation in the breath. There is no extra slowing down of the breath. It will just go naturally. And what does that imply? It implies that the mind or thoughts will also remain in a state of equilibrium. There will be no agitation in the mind. Because if there is no agitation in the breath, there is no agitation in the mind. If there is agitation in the breath, there is agitation in the mind. If there is agitation in the mind, there is agitation in the breath. So one can control one through the other. Here, as Bhagavan is teaching us, the way of controlling the mind through the breath, Bhagavan says, the best way is to bring the breath to a point of equilibrium, to sama, to the sama. In the earlier chapter, we saw the concept of samadhi, the mind being in equilibrium. So here, this state of equilibrium of the mind is induced, as it were, through the equilibrium of the breath. Then Bhagavan says, what if you are not able to get to this point of equilibrium? What if you are not able to watch the breath also? First he said, if we are not able to do enquiry, then we take the support of breath control. In breath control, the best way is to watch the breath. What if you are not even able to do that? Then Bhagavan says, Esham naitena vidhina shaktim kumbhaka sadhaye sadhane hatha yoga vidhanena tesham kumbhaka mishyate. Says then one has to resort to Hatha Yoga. Hatha Yoga is conscious regulation of the breath. And for this Bhagavan suggests, Ekadare chakam kuryat purakam ekada kumbhakam tu chaturvaram nadi shuddhir bhavet tataha. In the Hatha Yogic practice of breath control, which is a conscious regulation of the breath, as opposed to simple watching of the breath, where no regulation is superimposed, no change of the breath is attempted, no change of the breathing pattern is attempted. However, if that is not possible, then one comes to Hatha Yoga, which is a conscious regulation of the breath. Then Bhagavan says, one measure of inhaling, one measure of exhaling, and 4 measures of retaining. Kumbhakam is retaining. Bhagavan says, Ekada Rechakam, 1 inward breath, inhalation, 1 exhalation, and 4 kumbhaka. That means this kumbhaka, which he is suggesting over here, is bahir kumbhaka. That is, after normally we may say that we inhale the breath, then retain the breath, then exhale the breath. But Bhagavan is saying, inhale the breath, exhale the breath, and then retain. So when we exhale, after exhalation, before taking in the next inhalation, Bhagavan is suggesting the maintenance of a gap of 4 measures of kumbhakam. Okay, but then he says, Prano nadishu shuddhasu nirodhakramasho bhavet pranasya sarvadharodham shuddham kumbhakamuchyate. Then what happens is that one reaches a point of shuddha kumbhakam. When the mind is thus regulated, then gradually all the nadis become purified, and then it is again reaches the state of Shuddha Kumbhakam, which Bhagavan said happens by watching the breath also. So if one practices this kind of breath control, then one would again reach a point of equilibrium of the breath. Then Bhagavan comes to his own stamp about breath control. A special verse comes here. He says, Tyagam dehatma bhavasya rechakam jnaninam pare purakam marganam swasya kumbhakam sajasthitim. Bhagavan says that giving up the I notion. I am the body. That notion. Giving up the thought, I am the body, is exhalation. Self-inquiry is inhalation. And abidance in the heart is kumbhaka. So, tyagam dehatma bhavasya rechakam jnaninah pare. He doesn't say it is his own insight. He says the jnanis say so. The jnanis say giving up the body idea is only true exhalation. So, in every breath, this is called the jnana pranayama. That is, whenever we breathe out, we think Deham Naham. Bhagavan has his Muktakatrayam. Deham Naham Koham Soham. Deham Mridmayavat Jadatmakamaham. Buddhir Natasyastato. So this body is not I. That with every out breath, Bhagavan is asking us to recollect and if possible to experience that the body is not I because the breath has gone out of the body. Once the breath goes out of the body, what is remaining? Actually, at the point of death, the breath moves out of the body. The mind moves out of the body, says Bhagavan, carrying the breath along with it to another body. So when this breath goes out of the body, one can remember, I am not this body. But the next breath comes inside. Inhalation happens. So when the next breath is drawn in, even as one draws the breath in, Bhagavan says, ask Koham. If I am the witness to this incoming breath, the last moment there was no breath in me, it has gone out. The breath has gone out. So I cannot be this body. But if the breath is coming in, then I, who am witnessing the incoming breath, who am I? I cannot be this body or the breath. Who am I? So with the inhalation, Bhagavan is asking us to inquire. And then here, Antah Kumbhakam. Internally, the moment the who am I happens, then everything becomes still. So what happens is automatic abidance in the heart happens. And this is Kumbhakam, says Bhagavan. Say that I am not the body. Since I am not the body, who am I? And that question leads one to absolute silence of the heart, says Bhagavan over here. And then he goes on to give us the other means of mind control. So far in this chapter on mind control, Bhagavan has been talking about different means of breath control as an aid, as a support to mind control. Now he talks about the mantra japa, the mantra sadhana. Japena vata mantranam manaso nigraho bhavet manasena tado mantra pranayorekata bhavet. So he says that mind control happens by chanting of sacred syllables, by doing the mantra japa. By repeating the mantra, the mind becomes controlled. And what happens is the breath and the japa, they unite. He says they come together. Pranayo, mantra pranayor ekata bhavet. The breath and the mantra get combined. We hear in the instance of Punjaji, one of the great devotees of Bhagavan, that he practiced this consciously. He wanted to do the Krishna Japa every moment, every moment. And so he synchronized it with his breathing. For every breath, he would do the mantra japa. So every time he was breathing, the mantra would also happen. So that is way he consciously synchronized it. So all his waking hours, he would automatically be doing japa. With every breath, he would be doing the japa. And he would not sleep also. So night time also he would be doing the japa. That is how he did the nirantara japa. So Bhagavan says over here that when everything gets united in this way, that is the mind, the breath, and the mantra, the nada, the kaya here is the mind, is the breath, and the vak is the mantra, and manas is the thought. When all the three, the mind gets controlled, then the syllables, the mind, and the breath become one. Mantraksharanam pranena sayujyam dhyanamujyate sahajasthitaye dhyanam dridabhumi prakalpate. The sayujyam, the oneness of breath, the mantra, and the mind brings about the abidance in the heart, says Bhagavan. And finally, in this chapter, in the last verse, he says, Sahavasena mahatam satam arudha chetasam kriyamanena va nityam sthane leenam mano bhavet. If one keeps the company of sages, if one keeps the company of those who are abiding in the self, then very naturally the mind abides in the heart. We, in one of our dance dramas, we performed the incident from the life of HMR's adopted daughter, Challama. She would sometimes take food for Bhagavan. HMR had a vow to eat only after feeding Bhagavan. So she would send food, she would herself take food up to Bhagavan, Virupaksha caves, Skandashrama. Then later, when she adopted Challamal as a daughter, on many days, Challamal would take the food up to Bhagavan. On one such day, Bhagavan found that Challama was looking a bit tired. Then Bhagavan very gently asked her, "Why are you so tired today? Have you eaten already?" And Challama said, "No, because my mother is fasting today. She is observing a vow, some special vow on this day. So she is fasting." Then Bhagavan said, "It's okay for your mother to fast, but not needed for you and me. The two of us, we shall eat. You should eat with me, because if you don't eat, then how will I eat?" So saying, he persuaded her to eat along with him. And the very next day, or very soon thereafter, Chellamar, when she was on the hill, when she was climbing up, she found a piece of paper. And on that paper, there was something written in Sanskrit. And she took the paper to Bhagavan and she gave him the piece of paper and she told him, "Bhagavan, what is written on this?" And Bhagavan smiled and said, "Just the same thing as what I told you yesterday." It says that those who keep the company of sages don't have to observe any fasts or any rituals, because one does not need a hand fan when the southern breeze is blowing, cool southern breeze is blowing, said Bhagavan. Bhagavan thus reiterated to everyone the magnitude of keeping the company of the great ones, the Sat. And we know because Bhagavan has allowed us to keep his company. through these satsangs, through self-inquiry, through the nama japa, through music or whatever we may do, reading, parayana, what are we doing? We are keeping his company, the company of Bhagavan. And Bhagavan has translated this verse into Tamil and he has included it in the supplement to 40 verses, Anubandham. உள்ளது 40 அனுபந்தம்ஸ். The verse starts with sadhukaravar satsangam. So, such is the glory, says Bhagavan, of satsanga. What is attained with great effort through control of breath and then the control of mind, or through the practice of sacred syllables, crores of sacred syllables, japa, crores of japa, and then the unifying of the japa with the thought, all that is gained very, very simply and easily by keeping the company of the great ones, keeping the company of the sages. And Bhagavan guides each one of us in what way we can best keep his company. From time to time, may not be the same method all through the day also. Sometimes we may read, sometimes we would meditate, sometimes we do self-inquiry. And of course, of all these, self-inquiry would be the best means. This is what Bhagavan will tell us in the next chapter, chapter 7, which is about self-inquiry itself. Om Namo Bhagavate Shri Ramana.
Aparasachit sukavaridashe yasyornimatram bhuvanam samastam guhahitam tam ramanam gabhiram चिन्ताविहीनं हृदि चिन्तयामि चिन्ता